Is it working? There
That's
we
what it
go. I'm always amazed when technology works. I'll tell you that much. All right, so we are live and coming from my closet. Welcome to another episode of My Good Friends. It is day, 472 of quarantine. I'm not sure. It feels like Groundhog's Day. It's like continuing and continuing. So I don't know. It's we wanted to do something interesting today. We wanted to do a little future of rev cycle, kind of work from home. What are people kind of going through? How are they managing it? I don't know. Okay. So I'm trying to find the LinkedIn Live thing here. Hold on. Let's just make sure it's working. It's working, right?
It says live on custom live streaming service.
Awesome. Let me just. There we go. So people can actually like put comments in and stuff. So I'm gonna have to watch that. Fantastic. All right, special guest today, Karen Wilson, first time listener, long time. I don't know what that is, but thanks, Karen, for being here. You're the leader of rev cycle for University of Utah Health. Is that how you say that correctly? The Utes?
Correct, for the professional side.
And then I don't think Scott Williams needs introduction, but I'm going to anyways. Scott from Duke. And Kelly, our newest board member. We're very excited to have you. Kelly Kleckler.
Very excited to be here.
In her Peloton room, where I'm sure she's crushing me, even though I did my personal best this morning. Thank you very much.
Oh, a PR, nice.
Thought I was going to die, but it was fine. It was fine. The only thing was what sucked about it is like you can see kind of like everyone has a Peloton. They know there's like this leaderboard. And at some point during the ride, Kelly, this is what happened to me. There's like a guy that says 70 plus is the age, and he's like, it just goes right past me. And I'm like, I'm killing myself here. I'm like, whatever. It is what it is. What it is. All right. So we want to talk future. I always get weirded out a little bit about this thing. One time I was at a conference and I saw this guy who's like a futurist. And I don't know if you guys have ever been to a conference that has one of these guys. And I was like, oh, this is awesome. Like, how do you become this job? Like, do you go to school for this? Like, what do you do to become like a futurist? Apparently you don't have to do anything. You just become a futurist, I guess. You can just say
call yourself a futurist.
Yeah. You're just like, I am a futurist. I'm like, I'm not sure what that
little
means.
Business cards.
Yeah. I get little business cards. I should put that on my LinkedIn profile.
So we can add that. We can add that in many locations and just make it true.
So maybe it's just a disclaimer, like we don't really know, like nobody knows. We're gonna make our best guess today. So also I thought I had this great conversation yesterday to kick us off. I talked to my new friend Julie, and Julie was like, "Hey, I went on this trip and I was gone in Europe for 2 weeks, right when all this was kind of starting." She goes, "I wasn't paying attention, we're doing sites and everything." She comes back on like March 13th and she's like, "What happened?" And so I was like, I don't know if you guys have seen Back to the Future 2, but it's like Back to the Future 2 where he comes back to like this alternate reality, and he's like, comes back and like someone's in his house and like the world is like totally different. Yeah. That's a little bit what it feels like, I bet. It's like if you didn't know what was going on. So I want to kick it off with like, all of you have sent varying degrees of people home. You probably all had different kind of numbers of people that were working from home. But let's kick it off with that. Like, what does it look like? How has that transition gone from the work from home is like a privilege, which is what we all kind of started with probably, right, to now work from home is kind of the thing. So how has that gone? What are some lessons learned in that? I'd love to hear.
So at Utah, we were remote 3 days a week. The teams were allowed to be as much as 3 days.
The entire team? Like your whole
everybody
group?
Except about 40 people on the accounts receivable for a variety of reasons, customer service, et cetera. And so it took us about maybe a week to get those 40 people remote when we got the word that everybody must be remote. And so I am starting to get pressure now about, well, when we return, are we going to be able to do more remote. The problem that I had was my coders had been for several years 100% remote. And I felt like it was impacting my culture in a way that people were becoming contract workers. There was no connectivity to the team, to the office, those type of things. So about a year ago, I said, nah, we're going to have a couple days in the office, everybody on every team, and you guys can decide when and where and how. So most of them are loving going back to their 100% because I took quite a bit of heat for that decision. And there's now the heat on, well, when we return, do we have to return? Can we keep working 100%? And I think for us, the biggest change was I required my supervisors to have daily huddles with the teams all on camera.
Mm-hmm.
So we don't have any meetings internally anyway that don't have full camera going. And that causes problems because people's internets, the video gets a little wonky and those type of things. But so those are some of the things we're working through. But I think that there is some benefits to the more remote. I never have worked remote. This is my first time, right? Because I was banned from the office as well. So it's interesting. I'm looking forward to seeing what's going to actually happen, to be honest with you.
Yeah.
I think we probably had, I will say, of the people that can work from home, so not including our PAS, patient access staff, probably maybe 20 to 30% that we had moved home. And one of my biggest lessons learned is those people we had neglected, because the people that move from home as a privilege are just good workers and they kind of do their thing. And we kept treating them like we did the people that were on site. So we did have one-on-ones, but only on maybe like a weekly basis. And one of the lessons learned is as we've moved home, the supervisors are expected to be more engaged to the extent that when you walk through the office, you check in with people on a regular basis, not just your one-on-one. And I think when you go remote, that's something that you have to be more conscious of. So we've definitely transitioned to more frequent check-ins, but then what happened was the people that were home now said they feel that they're more engaged than they were before. So just lets me know we need to be very conscientious of that and making sure that we set some kind of guiding principles on how you touch base, how often you touch base, and get creative with that staff, because then I kind of felt bad that our remote workers had been neglected.
Well, it's like an intentionality thing, right? Like
exactly.
Before you just had these random conversations because you were around each other, and those were fruitful. But if you don't have those anymore, it's like you have to be super intentional about creating those. It's a big change.
You lose that water cooler kind of connectivity, if you will. And that's why, Kelly, I said, we're doing this, right? We have no choice, but you will have a daily check-in with your team, and it needs to be this kind of face-to-face. I think this videoing is working pretty well, and that does keep some of that connection, not 100%, but I think it's a big help.
It's a good point. We're at Duke, we're pretty similar to what Karen described. We've been doing work from home or telecommuting in the business office portion of the revenue cycle for probably 10, 15 years now, anywhere from 1 to 4 days a week. And so we probably had 2/3 of our people already doing some of that work from home. And so come mid-March, all of us basically, rushed in a week or two to send everybody home, or probably 95%. I'm sure we all have a few people still in the office doing some of the stuff, the functions that we just couldn't completely get off of paper. But I look at it, both of you brought up good points in terms of it's a more conscious effort of messaging that still needs to occur. Over the last 30, 60 days, all of us at the management level and the staff level, we've made it happen as best we can. So what other choice did we have? And everybody's putting on a good face as best they can about how's it going. It's going fine. We're making it work there. But undoubtedly, there behind the scenes, for every person, there's a high level of stress and level of isolation and disconnectedness that we're going to have to continue to get over. And I think you do it through what you're describing there, a high level of frequency, and not intensity per se, but frequency of communication, both formal, organized and planned timeframes and one-on-ones and rounding and meetings, but also that informal that you're talking about. We call it the office or the cubicle drive-by, but it's the water cooler discussion. And I think most people don't yet have that level of comfort to reach out to somebody via a jabber or a text or a phone call, because they don't want to interrupt them. Whereas if they saw them, they'd be more likely to, to drive by and do a stop there.
We've actually tried to do, I'm sorry, Ben.
No, go ahead.
I say we've actually tried to do just some fun things. I mean, the daily huddle isn't all about just, okay, here's the communication for today's work. It's also about, hey, what'd you guys do? And let's have lunch together. And, I mean, they're doing fun things as well with that time, just to kind of keep up, Scott, some of that external activity that they're missing for all these days.
What does it look like a year from now? 3 years from now?
I'm wondering what it's going to look like in 3 months.
Well, it's probably look the same in 3 months.
Well, I hope we're not all 100%. Yeah, a year. Well, and there's a lot of chatter out there. I mean, if you read the, the blogs and everything, everybody's saying, oh, the new norm is going to be, and I don't know, is it? I don't know.
I suspect, certainly for the next 3 months, probably longer, it looks similar to what it does right now, because most of us, until a vaccine comes into place, we're going to feel uncomfortable stuffing a lot of people back in a highly dense office space. That the logistics and the byproduct of that are just not worth it there. But I don't have a crystal ball, but my gut tells me this probably is our new norm going forward, and we got to figure out how do we get through that. I mean, for most of us, both the savings of what we spend on overhead for rent and space and all the rest of that, that's not avoidable in the short term. We're all locked into leases and things like that. But in the long term, that is a $5,000 to $15,000 a year expense per employee, depending on whether we're urban or rural. That is a savings that they're alone. But more important than that, I think most of the employees, not all, but most of them, love the dickens out of work from home, right? I mean, not having the commute time, the expense time, and at 5 or 5:30 or 6 or whenever you get off, walking out your door and you're home, and that you start to take it for granted after a while. But the day we start having to drive back in that half hour or 45 minutes or an hour each way, is gonna be like, what the heck? This is crazy. I can't do this anymore.
Well, and I'm going to have to say that I resent just like getting dressed for this. So, just so you know.
Hey, my kids made me wear a tie. Jeez. I was like, I don't even know how to do this anymore. I'm not sure I could.
What's interesting is, as we've started the dialogue with a broad range of staff about, okay, let's talk about how things are going now and where they're going to be in the future. How would you feel if this is the new norm? I would say a very high percentage of the line staff have said, I'm totally good with this. And in fact, I would be pretty unhappy if we moved off of this. Where I'm getting the most, either pushback or concern is in the management staff, supervisors, managers, directors, analysts, who are like, this level of isolation, I kind of need to be in the office so I can communicate with other people. And it's like, what are we doing right now? We're communicating. It's a different mode. And you're going to be in the office all by yourself because nobody else is going to be in there for the most part. So
I would argue it's the largest change in leadership in history, because you're going to have to move from like what you did before, and it's going to acquire a whole new skill set.
Yeah, I think two things for me is that from my managers, they're still kind of getting used to it. But in terms of their daily interactions with each other and kind of working across departments, I think they're actually more successful because they kind of ping people online and schedule meetings versus trying to hunt somebody down in an office. And they don't have so much time that they were using going between meetings. And so they have more time to focus on work. And I think the level of collaboration I've seen between my groups has been a lot better. And I think the other thing that, so our executive director has been doing these town hall meetings with us, twice a week in terms of what's going on. And before, when you have 650, 700 people, like a town hall meeting with bodies in a room is not really possible. But one of the things they had asked me to do is, can you do a town hall meeting with us, kind of like that. Well, now being remote, that kind of communication is now there where it wasn't before.
Right.
So, I mean, there's things that I think are a lot better this way, just in terms of the feedback that I'm getting.
So let's take a quick question. Prince asked, how are you all supporting older employees who have challenges with technology with work from home? So we talked about this actually in a podcast just a couple of times ago where, I mean, we had people that when we moved to Epic didn't know how to use a mouse, and most of those people actually probably just retired. So how do we move people who, are struggling? That this is like they've been doing something for 30, 40 years and it's going to be a totally different. How are you guys handling those things?
I have about 8 to 10 people every day that actually continue to go into the office. And there's only one of those, kind of like what Kelly was saying, that has to be there that have to be there because of the job functions. I'm getting mail, I'm picking up mail, I'm scanning, whatever those kind of things might be. Some of them have, like you said, have just said, I can't work at home. I have kids, I have grandkids, everybody's running around the house. There's just no way. And luckily for me, the building didn't get shut down. And that was one of the things that I was actually worried about having happen, because they were talking about it, this, locked in, everybody stay home, but they didn't. So I told them, I said, if you get to a point that the building is shut down and you refuse to work from home, that'll be on you. That I've given you all the tools to be successful at home. You have your thin clients, you have what you need. We have the technology set up. So I think there's always going to be that population. And do we value that 25, 30 years of experience and make it so that there's always room for them in their own unique setting and always have some cubicles available for those people that have to be in the office?
I would say that's one of the things I was very impressed is when people move from home, their peer group was very available to them to help support them. So whether it was a coworker, a supervisor, some of our admins, I mean, they really did go above and beyond in kind of supporting that group and getting them up and running. So I haven't had any people in maybe that age group that weren't comfortable, that haven't kind of gotten used to the new norm and are just as successful as those that were maybe more technologically enabled. So, I mean, my director of training is one of those who had some difficulty in understanding if you remote in, you can't hear yourself because you're using your speaker on your remote. So little things like that. But I mean, the peers stepping up and really helping their coworkers has been amazing.
Well, Tina and I have been talking about this, but when we moved, when both of us kind of left our corporate jobs and we kind of work on our own, there was a long period of time where it took 6 months for us to get used to that, not having like a corporate job where you could you have these responsibilities, expectations of it took 6 months to get used to that. Like we're basically a month or 2 months in, and it would be no surprise that people are they're either over it or they're I don't know what to do, or how am I going to get better? Whereas my thought is actually a year from now, it's going to be, it would be very hard to get people back. Most people.
You're totally right on that, because even in the last, we're 60, 75 days into this, think how far we have come in terms of getting comfortable with the fact that virtually 100% of every business communication you have is now done virtually. Zoom, WebEx, Microsoft Teams, whatever tool you're using there. And even this podcast here, in terms of the discussion, I mean, it would have felt more foreign 60 days ago than it does now. I'm not going to suggest all of us are feeling this is completely normal, but even 60, 75 days in, this feels a lot more normal. You're right, as you ingrain it over the next 3 months, people aren't going to think twice about that. The one thing I would say, and Karen brought it up earlier, because I think Karen had mentioned that virtually all of your staff have video components.
Right.
But we're not quite there yet. So all of our staff that were already working home had video, but all the ones we rushed home, by the time we got around to ordering webcams, they
weren't there.
back order through August or the rest of that.
Yeah.
So we still have a mix, and it definitely makes a huge difference having the video component of communication rather than just the audio or email or Jabber or texting and the rest of that. And I mean, you just pick up so much more nuance in terms of body language and knowing when to speak and not interrupt each other. That's the other part I'd say is particularly not so much for one-on-ones, but in group meetings of 5 or 10 or more, I would say even in the last 30 to 60 days, we've seen a better pickup of some of the courtesy and etiquette of how you interact with each other in large virtual meetings. That's come a long way.
Well, and Kelly, we've done some of the town halls you've been talking about as well. And, you know, my team members have all gotten pretty used to now using the chat. So you're not even getting those interruptions, right? And so there's a lot of things. I mean, I'm not the best with technology, but I mean, Ben was walking me through this morning, right? Yeah, click that arrow up.
You did fine.
But I think that, it is going to be the kind of, we're forced to evolve, right? It kind of keeps happening. First it was emails, and then it was, I mean, we've all moved so far in the last, 10 years even with technology. And I think this is just another step in our evolution.
So here's a question I'd throw out to the group in terms of what we've learned so far along the lines of, can you really do everything? Work from home and virtually, and what works and doesn't work. I think what in our experience, we've discovered pretty much we can do all of that. I mean, Karen, you brought up earlier this year, do we need to have people in the office 1 day a week so we can still maintain the culture of the organization? We were exactly that same way also. Everybody had to be in the office at least 1 day a week. And I think we've kind of realized, you can still do it via communication. The 2 pain points we've identified so far that we're not good enough yet. One is bringing on new people, and all of us are virtually doing recruiting and onboarding and training as best we can. But what we've seen so far is it's really hard for a new person to break into an organization virtually because they're even less comfortable reaching out to people and afraid of interrupting and their water cooler drive-by. So we have to figure out how to do a better job of that. The second point that we've not done very good job so far is performance management. When somebody's underperforming, what do? In the old world, what we did, if you're underperforming, you can't work from home anymore. You have to come back in the office. And now we can't do that. And the management team in particular has been uncomfortable with really getting into performance management virtually. And I don't think it's impossible. I think it's a learned trait, but those are the 2 things that we've seen so far that have been problematic.
I think that's spot on. Taylor asked a question that was exactly that. How are you planning to handle new hire onboarding with the remote workforce? It's like, how do you integrate someone that you're bringing on to start to, but that's something everyone's gonna have to learn.
Right.
I mean, the reality is I just don't think the days of you may not know anybody. We've been talking a lot about you may have a bunch of people that are in Wichita or Wichita and Scranton, there's you're going to have, you may not have anybody that works in Texas where Kelly's at anymore. I mean, no one wants to really.
Yeah, but it's a learned skill and expectation, right? It means telling new people, look, you need to take ownership for the fact that you're going to have to be more proactive in reaching out to your peers and your stakeholders, and everybody else that's within the organization. You've got to be more proactively open than you otherwise would be for those newbies that they're not yet comfortable or don't know everybody to facilitate those discussions.
The managers are going to have to get. They're going to have to get over this hurdle, whatever that mental hurdle is, of holding people accountable. And because right now it'll feel like, okay, we just need time, but that's going to shift pretty quickly.
Right.
But I think this is, a matter of emotional intelligence in a way from a management perspective, because you're not, so from a new hire perspective, you've got to really find a way to either buddy system them and really connect with them in a way that creates that culture, because culture is people. So how do you do that? And then also from those like performance reviews, like really, everybody has to be a grown-up now and put on their grown-up pants and have the conversations that are difficult. And I think that's all connected to willingness to be, vulnerable and authentic about what's going on. I've read a lot of stories about work from home where people feel like they appear needy, or that they are struggling, and they don't want to admit they're having a hard time not seeing everyone's faces, or not having those walk-bys, or all of those things.
Right.
And I don't know how, maybe that's a question, is how do you begin to foster emotional intelligence in your organization?
Yeah, I've definitely got some managers who are very creative in getting their groups together and doing still team building exercises and things like that. And I think that's really important. But I will say some of the feedback I've gotten as far as like training people is the ability to really focus on a screen and even share a screen and really help guide people with a very focused effort on the actions within Epic as our system. But that has been very, very positive in terms of training and really helping people do things a little easier in the system or better in the system. So I think that's been good. But I do think when you bring on new people, or you feel like you might be losing that, you have to get creative in different ways. So I know the lunches together, as Karen mentioned, and somebody did some photo contest the other day and everybody was judging it. So I think you just can't lose the stuff that you used to do for fun in the office.
Yeah, I think we're gonna, sorry, Scott.
Go ahead.
I would say, I think the challenge is gonna become when we actually have everybody that's gone remote, but they know each other because they've been together in the office and they've spent a lot of time to these brand new people come in, and how do you get them integrated into that team so that they feel like they're part of it and not this outsider looking in. So I think that is going to be a challenge, and I'm looking forward to others' great ideas on it.
I mean, there's plenty of positives that we've talked about. The one other interesting byproduct that we've seen in talking with our management team is we're seeing a whole lot less and spending a whole lot less management time on personnel type issues. Right. Yeah. Now we're only 60, 75 days into the new norm there, but there's not nearly the much of, Kelly and Scott aren't getting along very well and they're fussy with each other and I've got to intervene. And all that has disappeared. Now, I don't think it's necessarily gone in the long term, but there's a whole lot less of that because there's less daily interaction friction. There's bad part of that, but there's a good part of that too, in terms of making us more productive and forcing us to say, look, what are we really trying to accomplish? And
Scott, I lose like a week of productivity when we like moved people's cubes. It was like, I just shot their puppy and clubbed a baby seal on my way home. I mean, that's what it was like. I might as well have done that.
Yeah.
So
you took their supplies or whatever.
We can't have staples now, apparently.
Well, I think the other thing is I have nobody calling in sick these days. Like I have no FMLA. I have no people calling in sick. Maybe that's because there's nothing else to do but work. But I mean, we've seen a significant decrease in the amount of time that people are actually productive in the system and not taking off or asking for days off. As far as, vacation, I don't know where you would go, but.
But Kelly, I saw a recent study that supports that completely, and I'm the same way. I've had individuals that their FMLA was strictly to be able to work remote 2 days a week or whatever, you know what I mean, beyond what they were allowed to.
We can do that. That's done. You know what? Go ahead.
That is a really great point, because I think all of us have to deal with, the absenteeism, whether FMLA or not, was to either, to be homesick, or you've got kids homesick, or in the environment we're in right now, where we have many, parents with children who are not at school at home. And so they're kind of concurrently watching them and working. I've been surprised on the data that we've seen so far. We've not really seen our, we manage, labor standards and productivity. That really hasn't changed very much. And so all of this concurrent stuff that's going on is not impacting, and maybe that says something about our labor standards, and we need to ratchet them or review them to some degree. But
absolutely, maybe it's just too easy, Scott. Maybe it's just too easy, dude.
Maybe it is.
So, Kelly, I know you've done something controversial. There's been a number of questions in the feed here that are around equipment. And now I know you guys decided to make your people pay for it. What's tell a little bit about what you guys did on equipment side.
So I guess one of the things I didn't want to deal with was when people left having to go find the equipment, get the equipment. So when we initially, sent people home, part of the deal was they had to provide their own equipment, and we gave them a standard, like you had to have a certain level of internet speed, you had to have 2 monitors, you had to have the basic system to support whatever you needed for Citrix integration and all of the different pieces. So you would have software that we loaded, but the equipment was yours. And so we have been talking about that, because I said it's not really, when we sent people home, a lot of people actually took equipment home. And so we've had a lot of discussion about the equipment that they took home. Can they buy that equipment? Do they bring that equipment back after a certain period of time and buy their own equipment? And for us, it has worked out pretty well that people have furnished their own equipment. I don't think I'm on board with people, like there was a lot of discussion about, well, can they, deduct it from their salary? I mean, honestly, the equipment you can buy online these days is so cheap that I can't imagine you would want your workstation that you had in the office that was 4 years old. So we haven't gotten a lot of pushback in terms of people buying their own equipment. So I think it's worked out well for us.
I'm curious though, is it because Christine mentioned it here in the feed too. It's just really interesting. She's like, work from home was going to be a benefit and now it's going to be a standard. So on this front too, is like, well, what if people start offering, this is just the counterpoint to Kelly, your thought. I don't disagree. I think it's like what you're doing is fine. What if the counterpoint is like an Apple approach where it's like, no, you get hired in and you got this whole package delivered and it's the brand new laptop with the camera and the whole setup. And then, so do you know what I'm saying? Like all of a sudden that starts like, oh, we're providing you internet. We're going to pay for your internet and we're going to make sure it's high speed. It's just those, I don't know what the answer is. It just seems interesting.
I think the answer to that to a certain extent is 6 of one, half dozen another. I mean, there's multiple ways at getting it done. At Duke, historically, our approach has been, if you're doing Duke work, we need you to do it and want you to do on Duke equipment. So we provide the hardware for them at home. And right now, the employee pays for their own internet. Although I'm guessing in the future, if we get to the point where it's required that you're basically work from home, I would likely see that we'll probably step up and say, we're going to pay for your, a monthly stipend for your internet there, under the argument that we're saving some high multiple of that by not having any reserved space for you at work there. But I don't know that any of these are deal breakers per se.
Yeah, right. We did a kind of a blended model of what Kelly did and Scott did. We actually provided them thin clients, but they were required to have their monitors and cameras. So we kind of blended it there. But I used to pay for management internet, and I actually stopped that because we had everybody at home, and I first of all, the budget piece, right? Everybody's being asked to cut back right now. So I actually cut the management team's internet stipend and left it. So I get the staff who are making a lot less money are having to pay their own internet. You don't get it. And because I still have spaces in the office, I think that, Scott, is where it changes. If there absolutely is, you will work from home. I'm not even hiring you to ever come in the office. Then you may have to pay for everything that they have. But if the choice is, if you don't want to pay for your internet and you don't want to buy your monitors or camera, I have it set up in the office for you. And I'm thinking along the lines of reducing space when the contract is up. I mean, I don't need it all if we're only working 1 day in the office or no days in the office, but I think that's kind of the.
Yeah, I think as each one of us try to figure out as the future starts to become a little more clear, and are we 100% work from home? Are we everybody back in the office? Mm-hmm. Are we a blend? And is the blend based on business need or employee preference? And we've, as we started to wrestle with that, thinking, oh my gosh, what am I going to deal with? I've got a team of 30 people and 3 of them want to work in the office. I got to figure out the logistics behind that. And I suspect, at least for us, it probably is, no, this is a virtual work from home environment. That's an expectation. There isn't an option to come and to work, and trying to work through the logistics of that.
Yeah.
Easier said than done, but we'll see as it plays out.
Absolutely.
I mean, I just don't know, like 5 years from now, I can't imagine that it's going to be, it's Cube Farms again. Like, I can't imagine that's going to be the thing. I don't, it's hard for me to fathom. I don't know. Maybe I'm wrong.
I mean, over 5 years, darn near anything can happen. But over that same time frame, there's a lot of other structural things that are changing in revenue cycle above and beyond, our COVID short-term related work from home. I mean, all the things that are gradually happening with, some of us are doing offshore labor. All of us are looking at automation and RPA and AI and big data. That as much as anything else is going to transform our work and the revenue cycle of the future. And we've talked, this isn't COVID related. It's going to be a smaller number of people that are more analytical and less transactional in nature. That this is just happening concurrently with that.
Right. I mean, I don't know if anyone caught it. I put this little video out yesterday. It was basically like the 30% cost reduction that I think, honestly, everyone should be proactively thinking about how they can take out a bunch of costs, because otherwise they're going to get asked to do it. So, but part of that was, if you started from scratch, how do you build a rev cycle? Do you really have 300 people in your CBO? You probably don't, so how do you, like to Scott's point, like, honestly, not many people are doing offshore work at all, even as a portion.
You're talking to 3 people who have a lot of offshore.
I know, but you guys are like the anomalies. You're the 1%ers. That's why I like you guys. You're all innovators.
Yeah, but in fairness, a number of our peers are either in union environments where there's not really that option, or have some other, organizational predispositions against the risks associated with offshore. So
no, there's definitely an organizational predisposition that it was like, that's taboo. But what's funny is, like, on the insurance side, the insurers have been doing it for 20 years.
Yeah,
absolutely.
So when we set up the Accretive, I told the story before, when we set up the Accretive CBO 10 years ago in Delhi, the floor below us was Aetna.
Yeah.
Right. And so it's like, I don't know, then they've been there, we're like brand new, and they're like, oh no, this whole floor is Aetna. It's like 400 people. Yeah. So it's just interesting. I just think that the leap to kind of doing different things because your people are now remote, it opens the doors up to hopefully reduce costs significantly. Unfortunately,
one of the things that's interesting to me is the level of creativity that's happened in the patient access areas and working remotely and doing remote kind of work even with patients. So in terms of financial counseling, some of the video stuff that we were using for the providers, we're actually using that with financial counselors to have conversations with patients. And those were always, people in a room, and you always worried about the privacy and stuff. So I think the level of innovation that we've had to bring people that maybe we didn't think previously could work at home, and now they are working from home, has been very creative. And that's something, if you would have told me my customer service group was going to move home a year ago, I would have been like, I don't know about that. But now they seem to be doing great, and we're auditing the calls, and we have our AUCD lineup. So, I mean, I would say we haven't dropped the level of customer service. So I've been pretty impressed with some of the things that actually moved home.
Yeah. What are you guys doing to creating a touchless environment on the front end? I'm curious what's everyone's doing or thinking about doing to create a touchless experience.
Well, so I mean, all 3 of the 3 panelists you got here are all on Epic, but there's plenty of other platforms besides Epic that are doing the same sort of thing. But certainly, I mean, as we've all concurrently done enormous amounts of telehealth along the way of this path, e-check-in, right, has created a more touchless environment where patients You can schedule their appointment online, can go in the night before, the day before, and complete all the registration, make their payment. So all they're doing is moving from the parking lot into the and bypassing the waiting room, moving the parking lot to the actual room the care is being delivered, and trying to minimize any of that interaction.
Yeah, we're piloting the Hello Patient too. So we have the geo tags on our department so that, you know, as you get closer to your appointment, you can see where the patients are and know when they've arrived. So the Hello Patient, I think we've got piloted in 2 or 3 departments right now, but definitely looking at rolling that out further.
What, so Christine asked another question that I thought was great. So what about building a management pipeline for a younger generation? How can people early in their career stand out as a future leader in a remote workforce? They actually probably would have an advantage because they'll be much more used to it. But thoughts on that?
I think actually, Ben, that one of the barriers that I had, because I required individuals to be in the office and the supervisors and managers were almost 100% in the office, people didn't want to go into that leadership role because they couldn't continue their remote time at home. So I think if we're in fact in a full remote situation and you have this videoing and people are engaged, I think it's going to, like you had indicated, it will come across how engaged people are, as opposed to, are you just sitting back and you never speak up, you never connect, or do you? Because those are the ones who would be the remote leaders of the future, right? They have to be able to connect remotely in the new norm, new future revenue cycle.
Yeah, I would say to a certain extent for young leaders trying to break in, what little crystal ball we have in the future is being a leader and a manager going forward is going to be a whole lot less about managing people and more about managing processes and stakeholders and peers and communication. I mean, most of us grew up in the revenue cycle where being a leader was, I'm a supervisor of 15 or 20 people and I take care, sign off on their PTO and FMLA and make sure, Scott and Karen aren't arguing and butts and seats and the rest of that. Right. That's not going to disappear overnight, but being a supervisor, a manager and moving up is going to be a whole lot less about managing personnel resources in a good way, because many of us, that may not be necessarily the favorite part of our job there. So it's less about managing people. You still have to have the people skills, but more managing processes, architecting things, critical thinking and analytics, and relationship building with stakeholders and customers and peers. More about that, I think.
Yeah, and I think that's the one thing that you do get when you're remote is I feel like I do have actually better insight to some of those people who have creative approaches than I did when there was a lot of bodies and a lot of space. It's much more easier for me to interact and see things that are being done in meetings and more structured than kind of knowing what was going on with a lot of the noise that goes on in an office. So for me, I think I've had better communication and understanding of what some people are doing that are a little bit out of the box or leading edge than I did even when I was in the office.
Yeah, I seem to have a lot more FaceTime with my managers and directors than I ever did when I was in the office, supposedly, and running up and down to meetings all day long.
Do you guys think you're doing less like fire drill management than you were?
Well,
is there less like crisis?
If it wasn't for all the COVID changes every day.
Well, besides that.
Absolutely.
I do think it's forced all of us, though, to individually and organizationally prioritize what is important, right? I mean, we've had to do that over the last 60 to 75 days. It'll be interesting to see whether that carries forward going forward. But I look at a lot of the stuff that I would probably classify as less critical. We've done just less of that over the last couple of months because we haven't had the time for it. It's been nice. It's forced us to identify what are the higher priorities and work on that. And as a result, become more efficient on working on those most critical things.
Right. All right, let's take a crystal ball. Let's go 10 years out. I don't know. Let's just try it. It says you're a futurist, Scott. So I mean, like, we should just go.
I'll
with
retire 10 years out, but
No,
hypothetically.
you're a spring chicken. 10 years, you're still working hard. So what are some things that we'll look back and be like, oh man, I can't believe we were doing that. So like, what is it? What are some really interesting? What do you think 10 years from now we're going? How much different it is? Or are you looking back and going, this isn't? I can't believe we did that stuff.
I mean, I hope 10 years from now, the level of documentation that has to flow from me to the payer can definitely be streamlined, and whether that's with automation or, you know, being a little bit more innovative with the payers, just looking at the medical records. But I mean, and then as far as an administrative burden, the amount of attachment requests that I get, I mean, that would be one thing that I would hope that at some point we could be much more innovative in sharing information so that I didn't get a denial to request, you know, an attachment. I just got paid and they can look at it.
Right.
I think 10 years from now, we'll be farther down the path of having less fee for service and more, you know, a combination of value and quality based reimbursement. That ain't going to happen overnight. We've been talking about that for 20 years. So, you know, 10 more years isn't going to fully get us there. But I do think we'll see more consolidation on both the provider and payer side gradually. And with that consolidation, more standardization and consistency on what platforms we're on. You know, maybe Epic is still around 10 years from now, and maybe most people are on it. Maybe it's something else. There's probably opportunity for a lot more standardization on the payer side at this point than the provider side. So we're not dealing with 400 different payers. I mean, one of our challenges, for example, that we've all dealt with over the last 2 months is I'm glad telehealth took off. And if I had to see one more daily update from every single payer about how to bill for telehealth and which modifier and place of service and procedure code, the craziness of the amount of effort that we spent on just the diversity and differentiation there, I don't know that a single payer is necessarily the solution, but something less than 400 payers is a solution. And in fairness, on the payer side, they would say the same thing on the provider side. I need fewer providers, so I'm not dealing with so many different rules out there. So that consolidation, I think, will add some level of simplification to our processes.
Yeah, and I do think, I mean, I talked about attachments, but also from an upfront authorization standpoint, whether that's how you're getting reimbursed and it's not fee for service and you can do the MRI you need to do. Just some of those things that if you go back, I don't know, 15 years ago, before we had electronic claims and electronic payment posting, all of the administration that was wrapped up in that, and think about, you know, communication on denials pieces and upfront, you know, authorizations. If some of that could go away and be automated or not necessary because of how we're paid, that would definitely lessen the administrative burden.
Yeah.
I think our workforce is definitely going to be different, Ben. I think, like you know, as indicated, they're going to be more analytical. We're not going to have individuals that can just come in, sit down at a desk and be told how to check the boxes off anymore. I think that robotics is going to make a major change in what we're looking at, what we're doing manually versus technologically. And will this, you know, remote, will we keep referring back to, well, during COVID, we learned, you know, I don't know. I think there's going to be, did you make it through COVID? Here's what we had to do, sort of conversations that are going to also, you know, move us into different directions. But I think it is going to be, obviously, we're kind of evolving yet again, and this is going to push us into more evolution and more technology. It's the way that I see it.
Yeah.
I think Karen's exactly right, because we're already on the cusp of doing a whole lot more analytically and less transactional. I mean, in all of areas we're gradually moving. You know, we don't have payment posters that are in charge entry folks that are keying things in. We will soon not have folks doing no response follow-up, because the bots will be doing that, or submitting, initiating authorization requests. So a lot of that transactional stuff is going to disappear relatively quickly. I mean, it's not 10 years, that's over the next, you know, couple,
Right.
2 to 3 years. And what will be left are, again, a fewer number of more highly paid, more analytical folks trying to figure out not how to work the denials, how to prevent them, not how to work the credits, how to prevent them, not how to answer the phone calls, how to how to prevent them and figure out how to get us there. But that's a big change for us from a management, but also from the staff. Every single one of us has a relatively large cadre of people that are probably in their 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s that have been doing this for a long time and are thinking, I really like what I'm doing, Mr. Williams. I would like keep doing this till I'm retired. And it's like, if you're 62, I can probably manage this. If you're 42,
right.
that job is not going to be there 25 years from now. That job's not going to be there 3
Right.
years from now. How do we transition?
Right.
Which that's a great thing when you talk about being an up and comer. If you're working in a work queue and you're like, hey, I see this every day. Couldn't we prevent this by, like, that's an up and comer to me. That's what I want in my leadership, is people that have ideas and don't just work the work like the hamster in the wheel, but say, do we really have to work like this?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I think from a leadership perspective, my thought is it's gonna those people are gonna have to be really good at facilitating and figuring out where and who and how it's going to happen. Because I think that today of maybe you have a core team, I said this earlier, but I was like, maybe you have just a core team and those are super specialized, super talented. But outside of that, I don't think you own all that. But you have other things that own processes because they run the bots better than you do. Let's be honest. And we've got a bunch of specialized, maybe vendors or partners that you're working with, but those leaders are going to have to manage all that. And so, and I think for the employee, from an employee perspective, yeah, I think that if they're not thinking about how they can transition to the next of telling the machine what should be happening, and I think they're going to miss the boat, because it's not going to what exists today. Even like Scott's right, I think 3-4 years from now it doesn't exist. And I do believe the payers and hopefully the providers will make things a little bit easier in our streamlining. I do believe that will happen. There's some signs of that happening right now. So, but they're always going to require information and making sure that people aren't having procedures they shouldn't have, and all, it's been charging correctly. There's always going to be that, I feel like, but it's going to hopefully streamline, but it's going to require a whole another level of expertise that people, I mean, right now, I think we're going to have to work towards. It's very interesting. Excellent. Anything else? What else? You guys want to hit anything else, or are we good?
I think we're good.
Great discussion, everyone. Thank you so much for being a part of it, and all of our live people today. This is a first. We never done a podcast live, so hopefully it was enjoyable for everybody. We tried to answer a lot of questions, but there were a lot that came in, so I didn't get to all of them. But thanks, everyone. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you.